Welcome to the greatest machine I have ever made. Scratch that. This is the best machine I've ever made. With the exact same features as my original farm, except now we can remove any and all liquids from the perimeter itself. This is great if you want to actually use the perimeter for, let's say, a mob farm or something like that. You won't have to manually remove thousands and thousands of blocks of liquids. Instead, the quarry will do it for you, and it will just take a couple hours longer than my original quarry design to remove those liquids. The quarry does require 2 passes to clear out all of the liquids because water continues to make sources, but if you're building it in something like the Nether, you will not need to run it twice, as lava will get deleted while the machine is mining. You will also need to manually block off any walls where there is liquid flowing out of, because it will not place blocks there. But the way we get rid of the liquids is really simple. We have deployers placing moss blocks straight in front of drills which mine them immediately. I explain why we use moss specifically, but that means that there isn't a different system for the Nether or the overworld. You can use the same system for both. We have, of course, the 128 by 128 and the 256 by 256 versions that are available for my other quarry design as well. And if you want to set up this one, it has the same setup process, and I will go over any changes a little bit later in the video. But this quarry will mine out the whole area that you need, clearing all of the liquids, and I also show you how to get rid of any cobwebs since drills can't mine those naturally. But that is the quarry. I hope you enjoy it, and stay tuned for the rest of the video on how to set it up and why I made certain choices over others. Welcome back to another Create Mod video, and we're back on the same topic that we were like a couple weeks ago, but we have improved it so much more. You might be wondering how, because it looks like there's still a bunch of water, less lava, but maybe that's just world gen, and I will show you. We have dug out a whole area here, but why is this one better? Why should you use this instead of the one that I released a couple of weeks ago? Well, that is literally only this redstone link here and a couple of modifications we made to the miner itself. In the previous video, you saw that I couldn't really remove liquids all too well, and here we can't also, but that's not true. This used to be full with way more liquids that we cleared out quite a few of, and as you can see, there's way less lava. These are all intentional because of the modifications that we made. This does not make my previous quarries obsolete in any way at all. This is just a modification or an addition so that if you want a full perimeter removed of all liquids or any blocks or any like entities or something like that, like cobwebs I think count, then this is how you would want to do it. You don't want to use the other farm because removing liquids manually is a pain when it's on this big of a scale. I've made a smaller replica here of the new mining machine. You can see that there are deployers in the center, drills beneath them, so that when we go down, we mine any blocks that are in the way. And the deployers here will place blocks directly underneath the drills so that if there is a liquid block or an air gap at all, it will hopefully place this block here. So let's see it in action. We have a bit of water here that we will make disappear. So if we just invert this, I'm gonna let this go at a little bit slower of a speed, but you can see that we place moss in, which is required in the barrels for this to go. But then you can see that the water is disappearing rapidly. And once we get to the bottom, it'll be all gone. The only issue, as you can see, and that as I mentioned in my previous video, is that the deployers will place blocks coming back up, which defeats the purpose of a quarry. Because if you place the blocks back, it's not very quarry-like. That's more of just a remove liquids in a thing, which isn't helpful, which is where some of you brilliant people told me about contraption controls. I've been playing this game for a little bit. I've been playing the Create Mod for almost a year. I've made like some crazy stuff. Never have to deal with contraption controls. So let's go over what they are. So if we go into skim through Blockland, you can see that we have a contraption control here. The filter is set to deployers as well, which means that whenever this redstone link powers the contraption controls, then whatever is in the filter will not work. So all we have to do is when this is moving up, power the contraption controls, and then the deployers will not place any blocks. This is how we get the pretty much fully empty space here, except for some cobble and lava gen, because that's how things work a little bit, but I'll show you exactly how to remove all the remaining liquids. Another thing you might see is that we have cobwebs here, and if you're mining in like either a mine shaft or a Badlands biome, where there are probably just way more mine shafts, but also a bunch of cobwebs, this can be an issue if you're trying to make a perimeter. To remove cobwebs, all we need to use are mechanical plows. So if let's just place a couple of these along, and let's just drop this to the other way, you can see mechanical plows eventually will break cobwebs. This is helpful for our design because obviously we don't want cobwebs in here. Especially if you're making a perimeter, it's just ugly and kind of weird that they're floating there. So this is a great way to fix it, but you can probably also tell that they're not in the base schematic of this machine. That's because cobwebs don't spawn in every perimeter. They are a little bit more expensive, and you'll need to swap out the top part of the drills with mechanical plows instead, so that you actually can break them. Because although we would like to take everything away right away on the first pass, it's kind of impossible to get everything. And that is because of water generation. You can see that there is literally no lava in the perimeter at all. Over here is because lava is flowing out of the walls and not because it's in the perimeter itself. But water is still here because water creates more infinite sources. And there's no way around this, since if you're mining, let's say, these blocks, it takes time to mine these blocks. If there's water here and water here, it'll create an infinite source. There's no way around this other than going over multiple passes, which isn't impossible. It just takes a little bit extra time. You might also be wondering, why don't we just put deployers facing sideways to place blocks on the walls themselves so that we actually can prevent the water from spreading and making source blocks? That's a great question, because in theory it works. It works the whole time except for when we're at the top, because if the mining machine is right here and we have deployers placing blocks to the side and it goes down, deployers will place blocks to the side right here, up in the air, and then we'll have a wall of blocks this whole way down. And there's not really a way to make sure that it starts, let's say right here, because if there aren't blocks here and there's water there, we would want to place blocks. That would be great. But the issue with that is then there's no real way to check it. And especially with a contraption, there's no way to guess the height of whatever block you're at, and there's no way to know what is the floor and what is deep beneath in like a cave or something. And I've decided that if we were gonna make a wall this tall of blocks, then it's probably just better to remove the little bits of water that are stuck in the sides of the walls. Like over here, we'll have to remove that bit, but that isn't too difficult compared to tearing down the entirety of a wall here that goes up 20 or 40 blocks. Switching gears now to talk about what blocks the deployers are placing. You might think, oh, why don't we just place dirt or cobble that we mine, and then we won't have to really worry about saving a specific block or setting a filter for it. And that's a great idea until you try to mine something like an ocean or a river that doesn't have blocks at the very top, and it's a lot slower, but we'll get to that. During ocean mining, we won't be able to place blocks to stop the ocean water from coming in, and the same is true with rivers or really any other water source that is on top of the land here. Instead though, we use one set of blocks that does not change, does not get dropped out onto these belts, and hopefully should stay pretty stagnant at the amount that we put in. We have filters denying any of these blocks coming out, and you might be thinking, well, netherrack's a great idea. You don't mine any netherrack in this area. And you're right, netherrack is really quick to mine. It doesn't spawn in the overworld, which is amazing, but there's only one issue with that. What do we do in the nether? Which is why instead of netherrack, we're doing something even better: moss blocks. Moss blocks are better because even though they are found in the overworld, they're only really found in lush caves, and they're not found in big enough quantities to fill up a 16 by 16 quantity of drills. So you're good there, don't even stress about that. The other benefit is that they're actually faster to mine than netherrack. They have a hardness level of 0.3, which is the lowest for any block in the game as far as I know. And when it's going down, it will basically place the block and break it instantly in the same frame. This just means that when we're going down, we don't have to wait at all for the drills to mine anything. And if there's two infinite sources on other sides of the drills like this, if we were placing down cobble, it would take long enough for the cobble to break for more water to spread. Moss prevents it by letting the drills mine it instantly so that water can't even spread onto the moss block again. So you can see how fast it's going. It's like there's nothing even in the way, and you can see moss is being broken at all times. If there were water here, it would get deleted, destroyed pretty much immediately. We should then see that it comes straight back up without placing any moss blocks, and that is good. That means that full section is cleared out. But I want to show you how exactly to do this, because I've already kind of gone over how the farm works, how the schematic works, how you'll do all that in the previous video, so I would check that out. I'm obviously going to show you the changes that I made here and how it all works now. It is almost identical. As you can see, not a lot has changed, but a little bit has changed, and I'll go over exactly what that is. There were a couple of difficulties with getting this set up. First of all, I thought this was going to be an issue where with a moving contraption large enough, some create mod configurations will prevent it from working, which is why here I have the details of how to get to max data size and just set this to 0. This just disables the limit. This isn't strictly necessary, I don't think, but if you want to see the thing moving up and down instead of going invisible all the time, I have the steps here. I have a little bit more information on things that I found out because of you all testing out and using the quarry of the previous video. Sometimes this torch doesn't actually power this hopper when it's placed in with the schematic, so all you have to do is break and replace this, The same with this one over here. And then occasionally this redstone link won't be powering stuff. So if that is the case, just break and replace that as well. The farm works exactly the same as the previous video. All you'll have to do is bring it to the start. It is already at the start in the schematic. Set up all the configurations that I described in the previous video. Again, go check that out. The video's in the description. I'll throw it in the time cards as well. And then once you do that, you should be good. You'll also need to break and replace the contraption controls, because at least for when you're pasting in the schematic, I don't know about schematic cannons, but when you're pasting in the schematic, the contraption controls sometimes won't work with the contraption itself. So the contraption controls are under here, underneath these drills. You can see it's kind of 3 over from the side. If you just mine out a little area here, we're going to need to just remember this redstone link, deployer on top, contraption controls on the bottom, set to receive mode. Then we're going to need to break this and the contraption controls, place back the contraption controls in, set the filter to deployers, and then place the redstone link on top of it. Again, I already have the 2 filters set because I copied it with its MBT value, but you're not going to have that. So just make sure you put a deployer on top and contraption controls on the bottom, and then set it to receive mode. This should make it so that it fixes itself. I will also recommend just making sure and probably testing powering this one with just a redstone torch or a lever or literally anything. Give me a torch. That powering this will power the contraption controls, and maybe I shouldn't have blocked it up, but yes, it does. So that is good. We should be good. That'll just make it so that when the drills or the machine comes back up, it won't be placing moss, because that'll be annoying. The final thing that you need to do that isn't covered in that video is to put in a bunch of moss into one of these barrels. It doesn't matter which one, we just need a bunch of moss. I would do 1 row. If you can spare 2 rows, definitely do that. You shouldn't need any more than that though. Once it has gone all the way to the end and you have the full perimeter set up, and you want to remove the water and potentially cobwebs, you'll have to bring the machine back. So we're going to have levers here on the schematic as well that will control both the clutch and the gantry shaft. This is a little bit more advanced than the other tutorial just because you can mess this up. So if you're like, I have started playing the Create mod, I played it a week ago for the first time ever, don't build this. This is insane. You can probably build the other Quarry just to get a feel of how it works, but this one might be a little bit intense. And if that's the case, that's fine. Just get a little bit more familiar with how the Create mod works before you start trying this. So as of right now, I have my mining machine way over there, not moving, because I've turned off the power, nothing's working. And when I turn this thing back on, it'll start going down. That's great. We don't really care. The thing we need to do before we turn it on though, is to break this smooth stone block. What happens is that when it reaches the bottom, or when it reaches the top, or when it moves over, this redstone link will powering this block, powering the sequence gear shift, and making it really difficult to manually control it. If you break this, then this no longer works. You don't need to worry about when it gets to the top, it sends a redstone pulse, nothing. Just break this, and then we can start with controlling these 2 things. One thing I forgot to mention, we placed in a bunch of our moss because we didn't turn off the contraption controls, which is, as I mentioned, what this redstone link does. So I'm gonna just have everyone place in a block underneath this thing, throw in a redstone torch just to power this so that the deployers can't place any blocks. In order to control these, we obviously need to turn on the power. So once we do that, you can see, hopefully, my zoom, that it will reach the bottom because that's the direction that it's going. We can then just right click the lever on top of the gear shift, and that will start bringing the thing up. You should be able to see it off in the horizon. There we go. It is invisible for me just because it's too far away. When it reaches the top though, we should be able to see it. And when it's done that, we can get on to the next step. I would right click the clutch for this. This will just depower everything here. And then I would break this redstone torch. That is going to make it so that it can move freely on the north to south axis here. We can see which way it's going in a second. So if we power back on the clutch, we should see that it either reaches this end over here or this one. So we'll see that in a second. My guess is it's going to come here, but maybe not. There we go. It has just spawned in, which means it is back to the start. We can then power this again, and then it cannot move that way. The final one that we need to do is this one. This will move it forwards and backwards on this gantry shaft here. We break this. It's probably moving back. It has gone invisible immediately, and it was already really close to the end there, if not at the end. So we should see that it'll come back. Yep, and now it's finally in render distance. And it is coming back to the start. It isn't that difficult. It is just a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to remember. So if you are doing this, just make sure you're following along. Once it's all the way back at the beginning, we can put back that torch. That'll be powered now. And then make sure to break this block and torch so that the deployers are actually allowed to go. Once we bring it back, I recommend taking all of the blocks from this item hopper on the north side, and putting them back into the dropper. This will just reset the clock so that it can move backwards and forwards as it pleases. For the 256 by 256 version, it will be 18 blocks, and for the 128 by 128, it'll be 9. So don't be worried if you only have 9 in here if you're using the smaller bit of the farm. Now that that's done, we can get started. I need to, first of all, depower this windmill bearing. We're going to turn off this lever so that everything is reset up. Make sure you place back this block on top of this piston head, and then we should be good. If you're like me and you have cobwebs in your world, I forgot to say this before I started it because I fully forgot, you'll need to put in some mechanical plows up on the top where the drills are to get rid of any of the cobwebs. The way to do this is going to be to break all of these top level mechanical drills until you have a kind of clear and open area. Make sure you don't break any important components. That'll be these few here, because those are a little bit annoying to place back in the correct way. But everywhere else, there isn't really anything that dangerous. So you should be able to just break all of these, and then we'll need to replace them with the mechanical plows. Once you have that clean area, you're going to need to set up some temporary blocks. I'm going to be using smooth stone. It can be literally anything that is a full block. And that is because we can't place mechanical plows on nothing. They need a block backing them. And if we actually are able to place this in, you can see that we can place the block there and then remove the block. And that'll be the strategy. We're going to need to do this all along until the very end where we can place our final mechanical plow. And then we're just going to go back and place them all in like this so that they cover every single block. I'm not actually sure what's going to happen on this rope pulley block here. My suspicion is that the rope pulley, when it gets to the bottom, turns into a full kind of block here and will break the cobwebs since those can't be logged. So we shouldn't have an issue there. This is a little bit of a tedious process, but I promise you it is much easier than breaking all of the cobwebs manually, because that would be such a hassle. Those plows are now in. As you can see, I had to invert this final line here because you can't place a plow on a rope. So I just put it temporary block kind of on the outside of the farm and then built from that way. So that'll work it out. It'll break all of the cobwebs and we should be good to actually run the farm. If we now power this, we should see that this goes straight down. You'll also see that the deployers are placing in moss blocks. Let's get this into a time lapse. It should not take too long. The moss should not slow down the farm at all. It should be just whatever the max speed is, 256 RPM, up and down, over, down, up, over, continue until we get to the very end, and then we just continue that process and go back and forth again. But we should now be able to get into a time lapse. And the quarry has finished clearing out all of the liquids in here except for these final two. You'll see this one probably more frequently, even if you're doing it with just lava, because there's not actually a water source here. It is just confused. So I'm going to try this with a lily pad first to see if this will update the blocks. It won't. All you have to do is place a real one, maybe all 4, and then it'll figure itself out. Okay, this is a little bit weirder than what I've seen with lava before, but we can probably just do this and have all 4 of these blocks going down, would be my guess. Yeah, so you might have to do a little bit of manual work, but honestly, compared to everything else, oh yeah, there we go. It fixed itself. That was pretty easy. Again, I just put some lily pads down and then blocks underneath, and that updated those blocks. Over here though, you might have seen this during the time lapse. There was some cobblestone that we had to mine in this spot in particular, which will literally only happen when we're mining this way. There's water here that's flowing down and lava that's coming over from the side, which will continuously make more cobble even when we're coming back up mining it. Again, not too big of an issue. We're just going to place in some blocks here and hope that this is actually just 1 block tall. We're going to need to just increase this. And yeah, unfortunately it's a few blocks, but if we wanted to, we could just grab a sponge and do it like that. And that's probably a little bit easier. You can see that we have gotten pretty much all the water now. And that just took 3 sponges, a couple of blocks, and some lily pads, which is not too bad compared to the massive amount of water we deleted with the machine itself. So as those 2 last little water bits clear, you can see the area that we've cleared out. I can, just from viewing the floor, see probably a stack of diamond ore, which I didn't consider, and I didn't think about slime blocks, or slime chunks, but you could make a crazy efficient slime farm this low down in the world. But that is going to be it for this video. I showed you how to set up and build your own quarry with the schematics down in the description. There will be a 128 by 128 version and a 256 by 256 version that you can set up and use. Just remember to place in the moss blocks and follow the other tutorial, the previous video on how to set up everything if you're confused by the signs. But that's it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked it, leave a like, and if you're new, consider subscribing, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.